welcome to Sacred Enzyme. I'm Stacy. I hope you're doing well today. I have some super interesting stuff today to share. And it's based off of an episode that I've been reviewing. It's on Zohar, Z-O-H-A-R, YouTube channel. And it was narrated by the current Grand Master of the Knights Templar. And his name is Timothy Warren Hogan. So he's talking about all the stuff that we've been talking about here, about Atlantis, about the Templars, of course, the Masons, and the whole, how do we want to say it, the whole hijacking of the knowledge, okay? And so I'm going to just do an overview of what he talked about, because a lot of this stuff is important. So I wrote everything down so we don't get any facts misconstrued here. So the story goes back to Atlantis, basically, and it starts in the year 1096. So we were talking about how these structures that we have all over the world, that we know that they're older. So 1096 was when the Templar first joined, and they were kind of like, something's missing here. Let's start getting a group together and find out what's going on. Okay, so in 1096 it was started by two people. One was a Moorish man. His name was Q.D. Paines, and the other guy's name was Godfrey St. Omar. So these two got together, and they believed, I don't know if it was through their family oral traditions or what, but they firmly believed that we had an ancient past that needed to be discovered. Pretty much, that's what it was in the nutshell. That it was highly civilized, highly technologically advanced, and they knew that there were leftover structures from this time period, okay? Which I thought was interesting. So they first went from France to Constantinople, and in Constantinople there's a church there, and it's called San Bacchus, and it was designed by an alchemist, and there was all kind of alchemy and everything in the architecture. Okay, so Constantinople was built before 10,096, so 15 years old, 100 years old at least, minimum. Okay, and obviously it was left over from the Atlantean civilization, right? So 3,000 years is what we're talking. Isn't that when we had the Great Flood? So they went from France to Constantinople to the Church of Saint Sergius. It was designed by an alchemist, and they met with a guy named San Bacchus, and it contained an order called the Brothers of the East. It was founded in Greece in 1057, and it was moved to Constantinople. So 1057. Before 1057, we had this other order called the Brothers of the East, and founded in Greece. So we've been talking about the Celts, the Proto-Celtic people, and how all this stuff goes back to the Iberian Peninsula, Northwest Europe, the Iberian Peninsula. And these Proto-Celtic people went to Egypt, according to this book, Irish Wisdom Preserved in the Bible and Pyramids. This is a book I've been reading and I've been sharing information on. And also I've been reading this book by Robert Seffer called Gods with Amnesia and the Subterranean Worlds of the Inner Earth. I read a bunch. I almost read half of that book yesterday. It's really interesting. We're going to get into that too. So it was moved to Constantinople. So Godfrey and Q.D. Paines, they were initiated into a mission, and they began as the Order of the Temple, okay? Previously known as the Courtites of Christ in the Temple of Solomon. So they were given a mission to Jerusalem, okay, to find these artifacts. So they formed a group in France. They went back to France, and they hooked up with 7 other knights, initiated these guys, and then they formulated a plan that they were going to go to Jerusalem to start digging. So that's what they did. So they were looking at the land around Solomon's temple, and they were digging there. And they found, okay, but as a cover, they did the whole protecting Christians on their passage to the Holy Land, okay? So that was their cover the whole time they were digging. They were doing archaeology. So they found proof of an old civilization along with other things that would embarrass the religious establishment. And at the time, we all know who that that religious establishment was, and that was the Roman Catholic Church. Okay? And so they were told to keep quiet about it because they were talking to the Pope at the time, and his name was Pope Irving VII. And Pope Irving VII had given them a little spot of land next to Solomon's temple to excavate, because I guess the Pope thought that they were going to just bring all this information back to Rome, and then Rome would have everything and nobody would ever find out anything, is pretty much the way I understand this story. So after they started finding all this stuff, and then they were getting with all these other experts around the world and how to translate these things, and all these older orders that were, you know, break off civilizations from this Atlantean group that had this knowledge of alchemy and all these other things, they started to realize what was really happening. So they knew that after finding all this stuff, that they were going to have to hide it, because, you know, the Roman Catholic Church was starting to get upset with the stuff that they were finding. So in the beginning, they had this open communication going back with Pope Irving VII, you know, what they were finding, because, you know, they were being funded by the church, because, you know, the church at that time had already set itself up, and it was a business. It was a monetary business of control. So they kept finding this symbol in this very old civilization of these artifacts of an equal arm cross. And they also found it in Egypt. It's that cross that is fancy, kind of fancy looking, and it's hanging on these Egyptians' necks, and it's depicted in the architecture and these Anunnaki gods in Samaria. So that's how they got that red cross that they started wearing, the Templars, okay? So they realized that in order for them to keep going with this stuff, that they were going to have to get very structured and make themselves into like a small organization, because they needed rules and regulations and all this, because they started realizing the gravity of the stuff that they were discovering, that they were finding information that was like epically world-changing and would completely destroy the current grip that was on civilization at the time by the church. Okay, so they set up this with, and they met with Saint Bernard of Clairvaux. He was a secretly practicing Druid, and he had joined the Catholic Church, because, you know, you have to remember back in that time, in the 600s and 700s, that when Rome was dominating Europe and the Iberian Peninsula, that these people didn't have a choice. You either converted, or you got you had to run, you know. And we talked about how you know, these people, we had these Moorish people that were living in Spain, and then you had Muslim conquest come in there, because Spain was trying to be flipped to a Muslim state. And then you had the Catholics come in, and so it was either become Catholic or die. And so you had a lot of Moorish people that got expelled out of there, because they weren't about to change their religion from being Islamic to being Roman Catholic. They weren't going to do it, because a lot of these Islamic people, they had more knowledge of alchemy and different things, you know. Well, I wouldn't say Muslim, they were Islamic. So they became, when these guys got together and they made themselves more structured, you know, they were called the Templars, and basically Templar meant Allah. So they weren't enemies of the Islamic or Order of Allah. They actually went there, and, you know, they went to these different areas around the Mediterranean basin, and they were studying in these old, and they had to translate a lot of these documents that they found. So, they were learning stuff from these people, all about the Gnosis and all of these things that we've been being misinformed about for a very long time. Okay, so the Roman, and then when they went back, after they formed their structure and they went back and started digging in Jerusalem, they found arks with an S of the covenant. Arks. There are multiple arks. And they found this unknown white substance inside them that they called manna. And you know how we talked about manna from heaven, and when the Hebrews were supposedly wandering through the Egypt for 40 years, or through the wilderness for 40 years, and the manna came from heaven, all an allegory and a metaphor, just like we found from the Irish wisdom preserved in the pyramids. The Bible and the pyramids is that everything in the Bible is an allegory. Well, they discovered the same thing. So they set up vaults. Well, the Roman Church, when they found out about this stuff, they realized that, we're going to have to protect this stuff, because if it gets back to Rome, it's never going to see the light of day. Just like the 5 miles of hidden things that are underneath the Vatican right now, and that they're their own city, their own state, and they have an army, and there's a reason for that. There's a reason for that. They have shit doesn't belong to them. It belongs to the world. It belongs to the world. So they decided that they were going to have to hide this stuff. So they set up vaults in Palestine, Portugal, Lebanon, and Scotland. So, let's look at these points. How many of these places are in constant state of conflict? Exactly. So, this became the new mission of the Templars, was to safeguard these things from Rome, basically. And so the church found out, so they were wanting to strike a deal. The Templars were kind of like, we could probably use this to our advantage and blackmail the church a little bit, use it for leverage. So they did that for a while. And so Rome continued to let them, they started building all these cathedrals in France. So all these Gothic cathedrals in France, they were built in the year 1000 to 1100. So these churches are like 1500 years old. So they were letting them build churches up everywhere, and they were building their organization up all over Europe. And it was consisting of stonemasons, priests, farmers, scribes, and all kind of things. So they built over 1,000 church structures in 200 years around Europe, and these were called the Gothic cathedrals, like Notre Dame, which means mother, which means feminine divine mother. So that was the other thing that they were finding out. They were finding out these Atlantean secrets, which the ark's powdery substance was able to heal the body, stimulate consciousness, and they got the recipe from the walls of from the Egyptian hieroglyphs. That's how they ended up finding the recipe. This led to extended life. So this is where you get this whole term of Saint Germain, and why Robert the Bruce, the king of the Scots, why Robert the Bruce said that whoever was initiated as the Grand Master of the Templars would be known as Saint Germain from then on out. It's because they had discovered what, people were trying to find the fountain of youth and all this stuff. They were discovering that this powdery substance, and by the way, the ark was a capacitator, and that this powdery substance inside, reacting with the shape and the cubics and everything that had to do with the building, the metrics of the shape of the ark and everything, because it's all sacred geometry and alchemy combined together. So it would shock the shit out of them and kill them. So they had to learn it basically was an experiment for them too. So I don't know how many people died trying to figure out how they could handle these arks, because they had the stuff inside. Well, it turns out that stuff was nanoparticles of platinum, and that they could take that, combine it with some other alchemical substances, and it turned red, and it actually tasted like blood. So they started to believe that this is where you get this whole thing in the church of the sipping of the blood and the eating of the body, the bread of my body, and all that was these elixirs. It was a life-extending thing. So when you became Gnostic and you got the knowledge of Sophia and the divine wisdom, then you realized that it wasn't about going into church and them doing all this stuff to you and everything. It was about it's becoming one with your consciousness and going back, merging your Christ and your Sophia and your divine mother, your soul, and your Christ consciousness and your universal mind, and bringing them back together. Because, you know, we talked about how in antiquity, in Atlantean times, that they had a bicameral mind, that their mind was automatically directly connected to Source, Sophia. You were connected to the Divine Mother. This is why they worshiped the Divine Mother. The Divine Mother was Sophia. She fell, and this is where you get these archons that come in. These archons are the things that are to keep you confused, and in this Lucisphere, you know, to keep you confused and unknowing, and you have to rise above that. This is why there's alchemy and all of these things. It's about using your body to transmute this energy from your sex organs, because this is a sex planet, the sex organs up to the brain. And that is vitality. That is your inner vitality. That's your chi. That's why they call it your chi. You have to move that sex energy, vitality, you transmute it up through your body, and that helps keep you young. But there were other things that you know, just like we talked about, like the Celtic people, they mined salt. They mined their vitamins. They had orchards, which were called the golden apples. And some things were more sacred than others, because there's certain fruits that if you look at the bottom, not where the stem is, but the bottom of the fruit, it'll have a little nipple, or you know, it'll always have a dot on it, you know. It's like the end of the core. It's like the vagal nerve inside the fruit. You have the stem, which is up here, and then you have the base, which is the bottom. And if you flip a fruit over the opposite side of the stem, sometimes you'll see a shape that looks like a star. Those were considered sacred fruits and vegetables because of the shape. It was a hexagram, and that was a symbol. Not the triangle is a symbol of femininity and the Divine Mother, but also the hexagram was a convergence of the whole thing, of the bicameral mind, of the Trinity, however you want to call it. That was the shape, which is in a lot of things in nature, ironically, in our food. So the Templars found esoteric information about Genesis. They found artifacts and scrolls, and one of them was called this Zohar text. And we've talked about this Zoroastrianism and how they had this this flame, this eternal flame. It all ties back in together. And now I'm starting to think that a lot of these old structures where we have what looks like bell towers, an excessive amount of bell towers on top of it, like the Kenilworth Lodge in Sebring, it has these towers on the end, which perplex me. But also the Don Caesar in St. Pete has the same thing. And you know, I was in St. Pete last week, and we went by the Don Caesar. And if you look on top, where in the middle there's bells, but on the ends there's it actually looks like a kind of an outdoor receptacle for a fire. And they have the ones that had the bells in them, they have them all painted nice, white, and pristine. But the ones on the end, if you get a close look at them, you will see that they are covered in like black soot. So I think those were fireproof bricks that were put in there, and that was the sacred fire of the Zohar that was in those buildings. And I think the same thing was in St. Anne's Shrine. It was in St. Anne's Shrine, because you see these different kind of crosses that are in there, and you have the mariner's anchor. So this was Atlantean civilization here, because the mariner's anchor comes from Poseidon. And Atlantis, they had this relationship with Poseidon, and they believed in the Divine Mother. And Atlantis was based on, the civilization was set up on the divine, by the Divine Mother, Sophia. Atlantean was her. It was a her. It was a her. and the United States was a her too. So they started. They gave this Zohar text to the Jewish communities in Spain to translate them. Okay, and what was published would be known as Parzival. And so this book is about the Grail story in the 1200s. It said that they were guardians of the Holy Grail in Toledo. Zohar was the creation blueprint, and it showed that there were 10 aspects of God's consciousness, and this coincided with 22 pathways corresponding to 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet, with a hidden 33 spear, number 33 spear. So this is how you get this 33-degree Mason and all this nonsense stuff. Is just that they've went through all this schooling and they've learned all of this knowledge. It's just esoteric teachings. It's nothing secret about it. It just requires work, okay? What is secret about it is this group that comes from way back then, from the Roman Catholic Church, which are now called the Jesuits. They are the Black Pope, and they have been working with this order for world domination for the whole time. And they got the secret knowledge. They attained the secret knowledge, but they don't do it the right way. They don't use it for good. They use the Dark Lodge. They use sex magic. They harvest all kind of stuff and they terrorize and traumatize. They're trying, honestly, in my opinion, I feel like they're trying to discover a way that they never have to leave here and that they don't die. And so they use old bloodlines that come from this Atlantean civilization that still have a portion of their bicameral mind, and they're able to connect directly with Source. This is why a lot of people that come from the Iberian Peninsula and they come from old bloodlines, like the Jews, like these Jewish people that have been around a long time. This is why they never marry outside their race. And Jewish people are very funny about that, because I've had a lot of Jewish friends and they like to stay with other Jewish people. It's because they're trying to protect that Atlantean bloodline that they got. And the Celtic people, you have so many Celtic people today that are mystics, psychics, clairvoyants. They're witches, they're green witches. It's because they have retained this knowledge. They've retained this knowledge because they're old bloodlines. So these popes are, you can look at the Imagination podcast, which I'm going to give a great big heads up to Emma, because I totally love what she's doing, helping heal people with their trauma and bringing awareness so we can make positive changes and return to the Divine Mother. She has many, many people on there, and some of these people on there are related to me. And it's troubling what these kids have been put through. They fracture them at a very early age and try to set up altars in them. And this is what this MK Ultra is all about, in my opinion, is trying to utilize the bicameral mind of these young children, because they're very close to God, and then polluting them, sucking their soul dry, and just trying to, I don't even know. I couldn't even go into it on here. It's just so deep, and it is so sickening and sad that these people are at a level of evil. And they even use the church monasteries to house these kids in against their will, and put them in forced breeding programs where they spend all day just breeding. If you have a young man that has a good bloodline, one of these ancient bloodlines, these Israeli or one of these Celtic bloodlines, that they will keep these kids on medicated, so they're constantly wanting to have sex. They'll medicate them, and they'll have them coming in, having them stay in a monastery somewhere, and which kind of looks like, I don't know if you've ever seen the Fort Jefferson down in the Keys, but the one guy was talking about it looks like one of those places. And it's a monastery, and a lot of them are run by nuns. And I really, you shouldn't even call them nuns, because there's nothing about them that's religious, spiritual, or in a state of gnosis. It's just all evil. They're kept there, they're locked up, and they're forced to breed, and among other things. And you can go check out Emma's podcast, Imagination Podcast. I'd recommend you checking her out on Rumble, because YouTube is trying to censor her. She's already had 2 strikes, and they're trying to shut her channel down. So, you know, she has to put her content on a platform that allows for free speech. It's not controlled by the people that are running our media. So they found out, you know, that basically that words and numbers and all that represent, you know, different hidden things, and it's all about consciousness and gnosis. And they also found out that there were 7 continents, and that one was not populated on the earth, and the earth is round and it circles the sun. They didn't even know all that stuff back then. They didn't even know all that stuff. They also found out about Antarctica too, because they found out that there's a place that has long days or long nights. I can't remember. I didn't write it down, but you know, it was Antarctica clearly. And so, finding all these things, they set sail to the New World. So here they come, or America, centuries before Columbus, centuries before. And they met with the natives that were here. And you know, the book The Life with the Paiutes, that was written in the late 1800s, and it talks about stories from the Native American tribes, the Paiute tribes, talk about the giants that were living here. It also talks about that there was an Aryan race of people that were here before they got here, and that they had an amazing, beautiful civilization, a society set up here. So the question is, and they said they disappeared, and they told them that they would be back. So I think that they went into the inner earth, because it talks about the inner earth in this book. And I'm telling you what, this is an amazing book, and we're going to go into it. But I firmly believe that the people that were living in America, that they went inside the inner earth. They went inside the inner earth when Atlantis sunk in the ocean. And the rest of these people that were part of Atlantis was the Ireland and the Northwest Europe. They're not even, Northwest Europe is really not even, Ireland and Northwest Europe are not really even part of Europe. They were part of Atlantis. And that is, I've read that several different times in several books. And so after they set sail to America, they met with the natives, and they were very aware of the responsibility of this knowledge. So when they went over there, they were basically scouting out places to hide. So most of these artifacts that were taken in these archaeological digs are hidden here in America. So, you know, now you understand why all these countries were in such a hysterical fashion here, trying to get here and seize control in the 14 and 1500s, is because they became aware of what happened. So, you know, in England, they let the Randolphs come over here and set up a government. But what they didn't anticipate was their Scots background, and how, you know, we come from the family of Bruce, and that ain't how we roll. That's why none of my family's in politics anymore, because they had to flip our government. That's why we had a civil war. That's what it was all about. That was all about Rome coming to America, and we had a civil war. It's what it's about. The America that we have today is nothing like the America that was set up in the 16 and 1700s by a group of Scots, Irish people that came over here doing the bidding of England. But you have to remember, back then, King Robert, his daughter married into the Stuart family, which is funny because my daughter-in-law is a Stuart. You can't make this stuff up. I'm telling you, souls keep being born over and over again until they work it out. So I think that's what we're here for, folks. We're here to make it right. We're here to bring back the Divine Mother. So anyway, they started applying to the architecture all of the stuff that they were learning about the Gnosis. And one of the things that they learned the most, that was the most head-spinning, was that they found a tomb. And in the tomb, they found these, you know, these little ossuary boxes, or whatever you call them. And it had the remains of St. John the Baptist, Mary Magdalene, and Jesus, and all their children. And Mary Magdalene had been married to John the Baptist, and John the Baptist died. And so she married Jesus, and she had children with both. So what they're talking about when they talk about Holy Grail and all this stuff, they're talking about a bloodline that comes from Jesus and John the Baptist. And and so when you discover something like that, you obviously know that Jesus wasn't crucified, that the Bible is all an allegory, and it's based on self-discovery and getting your connecting back with the Divine Mother so you can return to source. That's all it is. And it requires work and discipline. But there's people that don't want to do that. They want to stay in a gluttonous state. They want to be in their sex organs and stay in their lower chakras and perpetuate trauma onto people. And we have to change that, folks. We got to change that. So basically, to put it all in a nutshell, they found that they built all these structures. There were structures already here. And that, basically, it's all about gnosis. And they've changed the name 100 different times. You got to go down a million different threads to figure out what was happening. But one of the things that I found interesting about the alchemy was that they were making a infusion of aloe with hash. And this is where you get the name assassin from, because these people had developed this recipe from alchemy. And we were out we've been doing alchemy garden experiments where I've been fighting citrus greening with my aloe, and it's been working. And that blows me away that even come to me, but that came to me in a meditation. And I really believe that Divine Mother is working with us to bring all this about. Our alchemy experiments and everything with growing our fruits and vegetables, starting the seed bank, it's divinely inspired from Sophia. And, I'm really excited. It just renews your strength and believing that we can do this. We can do this, folks. We can step into our divine purpose. We can work all this stuff out. We can work all this stuff out. But the one thing I wanted to say is that these old churches that have these round windows, that these are old world churches. And the reason is because it's based on the rose cross, which is rose towel, which comes from Egypt. Rose towel came from Egypt, and it talks about the shape of this type of symbol. And so they made it into the window. And the other thing, which I didn't learn from this, but I learned from somewhere else, was that, when they were doing the Zohar fire, this internal flame, because this flame is from your sex organs on up. This is a transmutation, this inner flame. What they would do is they had the window, and they also had this coin that they made that had these serpent legs, and that's just showing that you're being born on earth and that you're a material being. Then the apron from the Masons, that is talking about your glands, and then your lungs, and then your head. And they had a rooster head on it, which, remember those weather vanes all had roosters on them. That was maybe a symbol. That was a symbol that these people were in a state of gnosis, right? I think it might be. But the other thing is that they purified this flame, and then even the Brehon laws in Ireland, I think they were the ones that originally started this, is that everybody would light their fires and everything during, I don't know if it was, I think it was it beginning before not before the harvest, before the planting cycle. I guess that would be February. That they would all come and they would light their fire from one fire. And this one fire was a special, very special fire. And so it was consecrated. And, these Median, Iranian, Aryan priests that were in Iran before it became Muslim, that they practiced Zoroastrianism. And what they would do is they would have these big round windows in the church, right? The rose towel, or the rosy cross, the rose towel, the light. And all of these churches point a certain way. They point to the north, And that's because when you have the solar eclipses, or you have this time of year where the sun shines from the north, and if I'm not mistaken, it lines up with either Sirius or Venus. So both of those are divine, this divine star and a divine planet of the Mother Goddess. The light shined through the window, and then they would have like a disc, a metallic disc, that would reflect the light, and they would have a sacred altar set up. This is the altar set up to ignite. It would ignite, kind of like when you have a magnifying glass and you're aiming it at something and the sun's coming through. It was the same concept, and it would light the sacred fire in the church. And so, you know, a lot of these old world structures have evidences of fires in them. So maybe some of these fires started from that. Or maybe some of these fires started from the fact that the Celts mined raw salt, and you get it wet and it'll catch on fire. So the question is did the people that were capturing all these robber barons that were taking these old world structures, did they just not know their alchemy? I'm thinking they didn't know their alchemy. That's why a lot of these places burn up. You know, because the buildings are made out of materials that are conducive to alchemy. You know, and they were making like neon atoms from the columns, the ionic columns. They were creating electricity. They knew all kind of stuff. It's crazy the stuff that they knew, and that we're just so dumb, that we've been so brainwashed. I mean, seriously. So you know, after all that's said and done, you know, you've got a lineage of Jesus, John and Mary, also known as the Holy Grail, or the San Grail, or Holy Bloodline. And that, you know, that the Templars realized that it's all about gnosis. So it leads us down to these questions is why have they kept this information from us, right? Why has this information been kept from us? What is the point of the Roman Catholic Church trying to suppress all this, right? So what happens now that we know what we know? What are we going to do with it? You know, it's one thing to have the knowledge, but if you don't ever apply it, what good does it do? It requires action. Just like I was told in my meditation with the Divine Mother, that it's an arrow. That you have to pull back the bow, and you have to shoot the arrow for it to go. So if you don't put any action behind it, what's the point? What's the use of it? And who and where are the Holy Grail bloodline? It's alleged from this Grand Maester of the Knights Templar that they were in France and Scotland. And these people were from Atlantis. And this bloodline is the protectors of this knowledge. They're the protectors of this knowledge. And they're still here. They're just hidden right now, but they're still here. So, and, you know, Rome, the Catholic, King Philip, the Fair of France, and the axed the Templars. So this is what happened to this order. It was King Philip of France. He was broke, and all he cared about was his material lifestyle. So he gave the green light for the Roman Catholic Church to round all of these Templars up and kill them. But they were kind of one step ahead. So this is why they went to Scotland. They went to Scotland, and King Robert the Bruce gave them protection. And so that's when they changed the name from the Templars to the Masons. So they became the Masonic order. And so one of the funny things is that the Templars were finding all of these black Madonnas, you know, and so they were finding so many of them, they started taking them back home and spreading them all over Europe. And see, that was one of the things that started all this, is because the church kind of got wind of that, and they were like, okay, we can't have people knowing about the Divine Mother because we don't want the mom here. We want this to be a broken society that's, you know, full of useful idiots. And that's what they call people. Useful idiots. And so on that note, I'm going to end that, and I'm going to come back. This has been 40 minutes, this is long, but it had a lot of information, and it was really good. I'm going to come back, and I'm going to talk about the family of Bruce, because I'm a member of the International Family of Bruce, and we have all kind of events that we get together and do in honor of our ancestor, King Robert Bruce of Scotland. And we're having a meeting. I wanted to go to Jekyll Island when my husband and I went to St. Augustine, but there's a meeting in Douglas, Georgia, for the family of Bruce, and it's one that I really want to go to. I don't want to miss it, so I'm not going to be able to go to Jekyll Island, and I really, really regret that, because I like to do what I say I'm going to do, and I'll just have to make plans to do it again. So I apologize about stating that I was going to go to get a tour at Jekyll Island, but it's really important that I go and do this, because after everything that I found out, I really want to talk to Earl Elgin of Elgin, and he's like over 100 years old, and he's the oldest, closest descendant to King Robert, and he'll be there, and along with all the other family members. So I want to ask some questions. I want to ask some questions about Atlantis, and I want to find out, exactly what happened here and what happened with the Randolphs, my family, and was this an inside job from the get-go? I got to know that. I got to know what happened, and we deserve to know what happened. So with that, I'm going to end this video. I'll probably have to come back and talk about this stuff later. I got to get to the doctor. I'm having to get a lot of work done with my blood, and having to have infusions and it's like 4 hours at a time, sitting in the oncologist's office to get iron put into me. But this is par for the course with these bloodlines. You have blood building problems, have all kind of problems. So with that, I appreciate you spending 42 minutes with me, and when you come and find me, I'll be here, because we're living in the past, present, and the future, all at the same time. We have been, we are, and we will be. That's the family motto. So thank you for watching me on Sacred Enzyme, and I hope to see you on the next one. Y'all have a great day. Don't forget to go outside and put your feet in the grass and say thank you to the Universal Father, and thank you to the Divine Mother, Mother Earth. Have a great one, and I'll catch you on the next one. Bye-bye.